Hi guys, good evening. 11 o'clock, a later finish in on day 15 in Virginia's trial, the trial of the century, Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. Before we get going, if you're new to the channel, if you're new to these lives, these chats, this analysis, do subscribe. There's a subscribe button down below. We do all sorts of other stuff, certainly within the realm of showbiz, films, movies, TV reviews. I think Nadia just did a TV review just minutes before this. We have vlogs, we have food, we have gardening, we have all sorts of things on this channel. You name it, we've got it. It's a one-stop shop for many different people. So do subscribe if you haven't. Also to say, you probably noticed, if any of you were watching the live feed of the Johnny Depp case, there is now going to be a pause in proceedings whilst the judge heads off on a conference. So the next one of these lives that we do will be on May 16th. And the court days are getting longer. They're going to start earlier, an hour earlier, and end half an hour later. So probably 11 o'clock will be more like the time that we all hook up. Welcome, Jihan Abdi, new subscriber. Welcome. I've seen a few of your comments coming through already, so just want to read a few out before we get going. Obviously, it's the big day today, second day that Amber Heard's been on the stand. She's not being cross-examined. It's her own lawyers getting her to sort of tell her story, tell her side of the story and the evolution of their relationship and their marriage. From the halcyon days of when they first met and fell in love, which is what we talked about yesterday, through today, really, the really bumpy, serious, allegations of abuse, sexual abuse, rape, domestic abuse, IPV, all that kind of stuff. So it was an incredibly traumatic watch and listen, regardless, I think, of what you think of. Well, some would argue it was traumatic in terms of what was said and what was described, and if there's any truth in what she was saying, traumatic in that respect. A lot of other people are saying it was just traumatic because it was terrible acting. So we are going to embrace both ends of the spectrum in this chat. We are not going to sit here just saying, well, she said this, well, she said that. We're going to entertain everything. We can't be afraid. This is a Hollywood high profile case. It splits people down the middle, though I would argue that most people seem to sit on Johnny Depp's side. And for that, I just want to read what Bollinger said, as in Bollinger. Hardly one positive comment in support of Miss Heard. She's this, she's that, no tears, body language is wrong, no picture of injury, sorry, and it goes on and on. I think it's 6 of 1, to be honest. Well, I think I've made it pretty obvious that I have a fondness for Johnny Depp, the actor. I have a fondness for his, out of a relationship personality, his sense of humor, his shtick. There's lots of sort of secondhand testimony of what a sort of nice guy he is, but that doesn't mean that necessarily some of the things that have been talked about today by Amber Heard haven't happened. But I have got my opinions on what those aspects are that we can, I think, quite reliably believe about what she said, and those that we need to treat with some skepticism and caution. Faith Goodman, when you're a model actor, you know about lighting, so why was her face in shadow with light behind her in photos? Why not take them in natural light? Perhaps because bruises and makeup don't look real. Oh, you cynic, you cynic, you. So Bollinger, you made the comment. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that, I'm surprised. It's quite tricky, isn't it? Commenting on, I wonder whether the lawyers on Johnny's side feel any sense of unease around the prospect of potentially, challenger. I think they're for sure. Johnny Depp's lawyers it's going to be one of the female lawyers that I think quizzes Amber for sure, because the optics just don't look good. A man sort of bearing down on a woman and challenging. Because we're going to have the cross-examination in 11 days. Sorry, we're going to have what's probably going to be the more sensationalist part of it. Don't get me wrong. Today has been extraordinarily sensational. The accusations, she's doubled down on virtually every single major accusation of abuse, sexual abuse, violence that we know. She gave infinitely more microscopic detail on it, which in and of itself is also an issue for many people who've themselves struggled with domestic violence, as to whether you could go into actually that much detail. But she did go into extraordinary detail in some instances. I would have thought, how do you think Johnny was coping sitting at the front there? I'd have thought if you have done these things, you'll be like, oh my God, this is just, what will people think of me? And if you haven't done these things, you'll be sitting there thinking, oh my God, people are going to be thinking these things of me? It's like someone said, I can't remember which one of you guys said it. You put it so succinctly, as you so often do, guys. One of them's lying, or one of them is being, well, I say one of them's lying, and this is where I sit on this, actually. A lot of lies are being said by one or the other. Some lies, I think, are probably being said by both sides. And where those lies sit, whoever's doing the lying is committing a terrible act of fraud, if you like, emotional fraud on the other. It was you, Sophia. There you go. Yeah, I didn't put it as beautifully as you did. Where did you put it? Sophia, I don't know how many people saw the Jennifer Grey interview from last weekend, saying that when she was engaged to Depp, he was extremely possessive and got into fights a lot. Not a wife beater, though. Well, interesting you should say that. Possessive, jealous. This is something that I've talked about on previous lives where we've kind of got going on this. What I think's really interesting, genuinely really fascinating, beyond this being a bit of kind of Hollywood voyeurism, you know, what goes on in the rarefied world of these crazy kind of A-list celebrities, is that it's throwing a spotlight over, I think, some of the microscopic fundamental ingredients of almost all relationships. We all feel a bit of jealousy, or most people do. We all get a little bit nervous and a bit worried. We'd all like to control things a little bit more, as long as we don't come across as being a bit too controlling. And I think this goes to the heart of all of that. You know, if you're a bit controlling, if you're a bit jealous, if you don't like someone wearing something, does that make you a domestic abuser? These are loaded, strong, impactful statements and definitions. And, I think, can any of us put our hand on our heart and say, oh, we've behaved entirely without any sort of pressure? I know I haven't. Jealousy has often been a problem in my life. And so where jealousy kicks in, you put in limitations, or you throw curveballs into a relationship that you're perhaps not particularly proud of. Tamara Day, they are both lying. Johnny, fully prepared for this, Anna. Another CG Gmail and a bad acting. Katrina Richards, he was hurting and frowning most of the time. He couldn't look alike her, couldn't look at her. No, he couldn't look at her. There she is. That's from yesterday. Yeah. I mean, there's an awful lot to go through in terms of what she talked about. And we are going to go through. We're going to go through it blow by blow. But it started with yet more photo. I think what we've got to understand here is what they're doing, what she's doing, what her counsel are doing, is they're like Johnny's team have just done. They're trying to kind of groom, in a sense, the jury. They're trying to lure the jury into their side of the narrative, their performance. Now, Johnny got a lot of laughs. Johnny was very slow, though. I mean, if it was about patience, I think I'd have been giving a judgment and buggering off as soon as I could. There was, whereas, with this one, she's far faster. She's giving us lots of stuff. She's overacting. She's overperforming. She's giving us everything. She's saying stuff that it's really hard for you to say, well, no, you didn't, because we have no way of knowing. And this is the problem, is however badly we think she's acting, however badly we think her facial gestures got, whether she was really crying, whether she did pose for that flash camera in the crowd that was on Twitter when she went, whether that was real, whether it wasn't real, what she's saying is awful. And this also takes us to that really tricky place of, if someone cries wolf, but in the modern parlance, wolf is something like this #MeToo thing. Do we as a society, do we have to be careful that we don't all just run to assume that guilt is there before we have any proof? See what I mean? And I think that's why this trial is of interest to so many people, because there's an aspect to Johnny Depp. I mean, for example, one of the crucial things I was talking to Nadia about earlier today is the fact that, with all of these others, Kevin Spacey, Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, there was a systematic repetition of similar behavior, wasn't there, from relationship to relationship, or from grooming scenario to grooming scenario. And we haven't heard that with this guy. We haven't heard that with Johnny Depp. So he kind of feels like, he's placed one step to the side. But yeah, let's move through things. So we started. So the reason I said all of that, we started again today with images of poor old Johnny, unconscious in the Bahamas, slumped in a corner of a hotel room. They quite quickly got to their Tokyo Lone Ranger press tour. Depp was unconscious in another photograph in another hotel room. She was worried, the kids were around, his kids were around. There was a lot of talk about, she described his kids as sort of wonderful weirdos or intelligent little weirdos, didn't she? I think, she was, what you mustn't forget was she's an incredibly young woman with a much older partner, a Hollywood actor who's comes with his entire family. I think, however much one might feel, that Johnny's being aggrieved and that this is wrong, we are also dealing with an incredibly young, vulnerable woman back then. Doesn't mean to say that she didn't, she wasn't a quick on the uptake and realized, hang on a minute, there's a few chinks in this guy's fame armor. This is what I think could have happened. This is what, I've said it last night. I think she's seen a few chinks in his fame armor, and she's gone, that's a bit of a weakness. That's a bit of a weakness. And over time, she's maybe perhaps learned ways of being able to work around that. She talked about the fact that she was earning money for her parents, and there was a lot of talk about Johnny's control and desire for her not to work. I thought, in a way, this is where I started to begin to feel some truth in what she was perhaps saying. He's an aging actor. As her counsel proved, his earning potential was going down. His reliability was going down. Like, albeit that it earned an enormous amount of money, Pirates 5, it wasn't earning the same money. Disney were getting a bit scratchy. I mean, I think everyone knew he had a reputation. So perhaps as he was on the wane physically, he's not as young and as svelte as he'd perhaps like to be. He's got this beautiful young wife. Maybe that aspect to their relationship was real. Again, does it make you a domestic abuser? And I'm going to ask this as a poll question. If you don't want your wife to do sex scenes, are you an abuser? I'd have thought this is something that hits lots of people who are enacting families or are in partnerships and what have you. It must be very odd if you know that your other half, especially if they're that much younger than you, wants to get into films and be alongside all these other beautiful actors. James Franco, I'm not particularly sure that he's that beautiful. So there was the suggestion that Johnny pressurized her to not take sex scenes, to not wear scantily clad costumes. He was particularly unhappy about James Franco. The interesting thing about the funny thing, whenever I've heard about the James Franco thing, is that James Franco has recently had to settle out of court, hasn't he, for essentially grooming lots of young female actresses into doing sex scenes within a school that he set up. I'm not being sort of facetious or anything, but maybe Johnny knew he was a bad egg. Has anyone thought that? I think, I know they keep talking about Johnny listening to Marilyn Manson, Johnny being mates with Marilyn Manson, but maybe there's some attribute in him actually thinking, you know what, James Franco is an untrustworthy bad egg. Do you know what I mean? Jealousy is not good, but it's not abuse. Dear heart, James Franco is so toxic, but handsome. Claire H, depends how you talk to her about it. It's coercive behavior. There you go. My viewpoint is, Stature, that if anything is possible, nothing is impossible. Amber could be telling the truth, so could Johnny. It's a really difficult thing to deal with. We need to look at facts, not bias. Stature, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. And this is where I find it such a sort of fascinating trial, or fascinating conundrum. Which is why we mustn't forget this is a defamation case. So really, but even the defamation rather than defecation. Let's not get back to the grumpy. And on that note, let's just remind ourselves of what was supposed to have taken an enormous dump on the bed, shall we? The thing that was meant to have taken an enormous dump on the bed was that. It's a curious detail, isn't it? So yeah, like you say, Stature, the problem here is I don't think either one of them could sit in there without sounding like a complete fucking wanker, their truth, unless there was some truth in what they're talking about. And I think that that's why I'm moving through some of the things that she said, because I think there's some truth in some of these things. And I think the age he is, the stature his waning fame, well, not fame, but his waning sort of success, his aging body, his rock star kind of thing. But also, let's not forget, he was into his band, but as his old agent said last week, it never made money for him. It didn't deliver in the way that perhaps Johnny would. So there'll have been all these aspects. So the idea that his beautiful young wife, half his age, is fraternizing with all these other actors, that I can believe that would have been a bit of pressure there. So I do think there could be some definite coercive control that had been gone on there. While she was filming London Fields, he made a proposal of marriage. She described having butterflies in her chest. Her father came to her and said, "Johnny's come and asked to marry you." She felt like the luckiest girl alive. And I think we need to find an image of her sort of feeling a bit lucky there. Well, she looks a bit off her tits, but she's not. As I say, she's just getting out of a car. She felt like the luckiest girl alive, but when she was invited to go to a concert with some of her co-stars, she claims Johnny threatened to terminate the engagement. And she kind of talked about the fact that when Johnny Depp and Paul Bettany were working together, she couldn't get her head around the fact that, someone of his stature could keep an entire film crew waiting, these aspects of their relationship. I think there's some truth in that. Uzair Ahmed, I'm not saying I'm on Amber's side or anyone's side. I'm just trying to strike a very objective course through some of the things that are being said here. I'm getting to what I think is possibly the most dramatic aspect of the day. And that does pivot around acting skills, let's put it that way. So I think she will be kind of staying close to the fact that he was jealous. She'll be staying close to the fact that we don't have to believe her that he would keep entire crews waiting. He did keep entire crews waiting. It's an age-old aspect of Hollywood. Marlon Brando used to do it. Marilyn Monroe used to do it. Actors stay in their trailers and they cost millions. It costs millions to reshoot. Schedules for movies, they build into it. They will have factored into it. Factor in 10 work days where he doesn't turn up because he's off his tits. There's all that aspect to it. So I think, there's a modicum of truth within that too. She talked, this will have been difficult for Johnny. She talked a lot around her role in his children's lives. She talked about feeling uncomfortable about there being 18-year-old sort of musicians around his much younger daughter. She felt uncomfortable about the presence of weed and drugs around Lily Rose. And they kind of got towards things regarding around. She also talked about them getting engaged around and sobriety around Christmas 2013, and she talked about how at their engagement party, he kind of came off the way. He's constantly on and off trying to sober up, and I'm getting to a point here that I think is again another truth. I'm trying to sit with the truths of Amber. What truths there could be in there. What truths could be in there. Not what happened. I'm not talking about what happened. I'm talking about the climate within which their relationship was. So I think he was unreliable on set. I think he could have been jealous. I think he could have been controlling around what she wore and taking on roles, and her sort of feeling a bit eggshelly. Most addicts make people feel eggshelly. It's a fact of life. And one thing you can't pretend is that Johnny wasn't an addict. Miss Soph, with his career already ruined, would he bring this back to court knowing he'd actually done these disgusting things and that they'd all be brought up? I just don't believe the severity of the story. I entirely agree. So he's constantly on and off the wagon. This is a trope all the way through the years. But he to the point that he was even taking drugs with Amber Heard's dad. And here's something that doesn't ring true for me. Here we start to unpick things a bit. I've said it, but I think I might have said it yesterday. If she had such an intimate understanding, knowledge, experience for all the wrong reasons of her parents being addicts, she'd have been more worldly wise around the behavior of Johnny. She'd have been more, in a sense, capable, perhaps, of knowing or negotiating around some of his behavior. We got to the discussion of the flight to Boston to LA. I think it was from Boston to LA. And this is the flight where she had a recording. And again, this is where I start to, I think, oh, come on, Amber, what the fuck's going on here? Johnny, terrible mess. He's so hungover. He's humiliated on the plane. He humiliates himself. He humiliates her. He smells of weed when he gets on the plane from Boston to LA. He allegedly he kicks her in the back. He's kind of saying, "Did James Franco slip you the tongue?" and all that kind of stuff. And then he screams. Apparently, this is all from her. Screams for the oxygen tank. I mean, Christ Almighty, we're talking extremely rock and roll here. Gets the oxygen tank, and that's when she records him wailing in the. I think was he in the toilet room or in the toilet? Wailing, and why are you recording him wailing? Well, she said she was recording him wailing because she wanted to. She recorded it to remind him of how he was, which in and of itself isn't problematic. What makes that become problematic is why would she across all of this film the least offensive material when she's got all this much more offensive stuff that he's done? Do you know what I mean? So if she's got it in her head that filming things to help him is a good strategy, why didn't she film some of these other things and then use them as a sort of strategy of showing him how he's been? And okay, if they'd split up, she'd then have that as evidence too. So what you say? Okay. Maybe that's all she could get. Maybe that's all she could get at that point. So after the Boston flight, they land in LA. She describes being scared. She describes not knowing where to go. She describes the fact that it was Lily Rose's birthday. I'm going to share something really personal now. I remember many, many years ago, previous relationship, when I was struggling with my alcohol, and I would refuse to drink when I was around my children or when I had access to my children, Izzy and Fleur. And in one instance, my then girlfriend, I did have a drink one evening when I had Izzy with me, and nothing happened other than we were playing and I'd had a drink and I fell asleep. And my girlfriend arrived and she came in and Izzy was still awake and she couldn't wake me because I'd fallen asleep with drink. That behavior, that's the one occasion that any of my children, because Izzy's the eldest, obviously, and I haven't drunk for 20 years, that one occasion burns through me still to this day. I hadn't said anything, I hadn't done anything wrong. I was woken up at that point. I had a girlfriend who came back, but what have you. But when I heard Amber Heard talking about she was worried for Lily Rose, what was Lily Rose making of her father drinking and potentially kind of falling off the wagon and things like that. I understood that. And I felt there was some truth in this. I felt there was some truth in her wanting to kind of try and rescue the situation with his children. But she resolved to leave him at this point. She felt powerless. This is after the flight incident. She went to Al-Anon meetings, which is very real. You go to Al-Anon meetings, they're 12-step recovery groups for families and friends of addicts, helping you to realize that you're not the cause of it, you can't cure it, and all that kind of stuff. And then she sort of, so she pushed him away. She pushed him at arm's length. She wanted to try and sort of, she wanted to try and, maybe call things to an end, and rectify things. But this is the pattern. It's the promise. It's the recovery. It's the rock bottom. It's the terrible behavior. Then there's the promise, and and I was getting to so at this point she kind of had me. At this time, she kind of, Johnny is an MDMA addict, says Tony. Lady Mandy, yes, with all her pitch-taking recordings, I just don't see any evidence to support her testimony. Where was all the blood from her cuts to her feet? Well, I'm pleased you mentioned that because I mentioned that too. So Johnny would go off, he'd get sober, he'd be really proud of the fact, he'd show his chip. Where's my chip? He'd show his chip to show that he was sober, though you don't really get a chip. I don't know, maybe you do get a 24-hour chip. He'd say he was 3 or 4 days sober. He was being helped by celebrity friends and what have you. He said, use the language, the monster will never come back. There's a lot of talk about Johnny when he was on the stand, wasn't there, about his monster and all that kind of stuff. And for me, at this point, I was thinking in the day, I was thinking, this is a tragic, tragic, tragic portrait of addiction. This is two damaged people who are damaged, doing damage to, well, him doing damage to himself. And curiously absent from all of this was she was holier than thou, wasn't she? I mean, she, at this point, there really is a sense that she has no peccadillos at all. She's not a drinker. She's not a drugger. She's maybe dabbled. She's had a cap of a mushroom. I don't buy that somehow. I just don't buy that. I don't believe that. I don't think anyone in that world, Hollywood, of the roles that she was taking, of the actors that she was acting with, would be that sort of naive to not be fully around it, even if not indulging in it. But in terms of Johnny, this is classic hardcore addiction. And I did say when he was on the stand that what he needs, he's still in denial. Whatever's keeping him on the straight and narrow to get through this trial is great, because it's the most sober I've seen him in years. I remember him on Graham Norton 4 years ago. He had blood coming from his teeth where he'd probably rubbed stuff into his gums and all that. Yeah, terrible mess. You know, this guy is still in denial, even about the drugs that he's on, the way in which he kind of manages his sobriety and all that kind of stuff. So I just put a note here. This is a tragic portrait of addiction, and it really is. It really is. Johnny Depp comes to New York to fight for the relationship. She's filming back in New York, crying to get back with him. He promised to clean up his act. This is this is all very real. This is what happens in relationships. I promise. This time. I did that several times. I promise. I'll stop drinking. And it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to kick the habit. And I said here, I make a note here that the addiction partner of an addict bit is very, very real and very, very tragic. Then we had a couple of instances. I didn't realize she was in Magic Mike too. That was news to me. Did anyone know she was in Magic? I didn't even realize she was in The Danish Girl. Is it The Danish Girl? Was that it? One big aspect that I didn't believe at all was the thought that she would in any way Eddie Redmayne and Amber Heard. I mean, he's tiny. He'd fit into her left shoe. Eddie Redmayne. No, you're absolutely right, Julie Taylor. And that's my point. However much of an addict he is, that does not make him an abuser. And I just hope that the jury understand that, because what's cleverly being done here is a tapestry of chaos, impulsivity, unpredictability. But let's just park all of the accusations of violence, sexual violence, and everything else to the side. Just the highs and lows, the peaks and troughs, the promises, the falling offs, the falling aparts, the language, the shouting, all that kind of stuff. That's the life of an addict. That's the life of an addict. And let's not forget, she grew up with an addict. So who knows? Who knows? She may have learned real survival strategies when she was a child to negotiate around her mum and dad's own addictions. Let's not forget, we heard that her dad was taking drugs with Johnny Depp. You know, she can't, on the one hand, be totally naive about drugs and the way they work on people and when they're coming in and what they do, and at the same time claim to have some kind of experience of it. See, we're going to get to, believe me, we're going to get to rape with a vodka bottle, the accusations of, yet again, his digit sort of intrusion, yet again, his threatening to kill her, strangle her, punch her, hit her, slap her. It did strike me. Eddie Redmayne is cute, though, Alison W. It's kind of cute, but he's very small. You want to put him in your pocket, don't you? She isn't naive about anything, says Lindsay Hancock. Oh, there we go, you see. So she was doing Magic Mike, Jack Daniels. I just called Johnny Depp Jack Daniels, JD. Oh, I'm having a relapse. Johnny Depp apparently talked to the male cast. And the really important thing is, everything I'm saying is what she says. Just like when we heard Miss Hughes. Let's just remind you. Do you remember Miss Hughes, the woman who kept looking at her notes? Let me just show you a quick image of Miss Hughes. Oh, no, that's not her. That's Miss Curry. That's Miss Hughes. Just as everything she told us was simply what Amber Heard had told her, everything Amber Heard is telling us is just what Amber Heard is telling us. It doesn't necessarily mean it's what's happened. And this, for me, going back to someone who said, are you not just saying she did it? She didn't, you're not on her side, are you? I think it's really important because lots of people are just like, no, it's this, no, it's this. I want to make sure that the side I'm on, if I'm on a side, which I think I am, the side I'm on, I'm there for fair, objective, scientific reasons. That's what I'm trying to get to. That's the place I want to be as I go into a 10-day recess and I'll have to detox from this trial. What are we going to do, guys, without it? What are we going to do without lovely Johnny and Amber to kind of distract us? Anyway, so Magic Mike. So there was talk about Magic Mike 2. I'm still shocked she was in it. She was meeting Clive Barker, the sci-fi writer. She said that Johnny Depp was worried she was going to jump on his bones, even though he was approaching the end of his life. She talked about going to couples counselling and how Johnny stormed out, rolled a joint, slammed the door and went into the toilet. Me and Nadia went to several couple counselling sessions, one of which all I remember seeing was the bottom of her soles of her feet as she went in one direction. And the one time I went, I ran off to buy 16 packets of cigarettes. Shit like that happens. Shit like that happens. It's a great distraction, isn't it, dear heart? Then after lunch today, there was talk of the Danish girl. I don't remember her being in that. The whole Eddie Redmayne thing came up. Disconnect. How could you say that to her? Who is it? Oh, yeah. And there was this curious thing where she talked about him phoning her and insisting there was someone in her hotel room. Now, even this had, I felt, a ring of believability about it. Lunatic, off his head on drugs, bit all over the fucking place, paranoia kicking in. Let's not forget the side effects of the amount of drugs and types of drugs that Johnny takes. Paranoia, grumpiness, hallucinatory kind of thoughts, feelings, and things. These we can't ignore that. We can't hold him on a pedestal as this great rock and roll icon, which he is, and pretend that all that shit isn't having an effect on him. But doesn't make him an abuser. And here's the thing. So he was ringing her up and he was going, why? And he'd ring the phone, the hotel room number, and no one's really mentioned this. And I'm not suggesting for a minute this is the case, but again, if this was a court case about whether he had or hadn't been or wasn't a domestic abuser, and each of these instances weren't situations of abuse, I would argue that you need to look into what I'm about to say. How do we know whether she knew that she had an allure and she was attractive, and that she knew that she could use this to wind him up or have some control of him, or that perhaps, some people in relationships get a thrill from making people jealous, men and women, don't they? Men and women. Kimberly Jones, what a brilliant question. Does the definition of abuser require conscious intention, Mark? I don't know. You tell me. I don't know. So who knows whether, and even if she was making him feel jealous, or maybe he felt that she, maybe she, I don't know, whatever. Does that allow him to be in any way jealous or phone and be like that? I don't know. Again, this is why it's so interesting. It raises so many difficult, complicated questions about control issues and balances of power in relationships. They talked about the Tokyo premiere for Mordecai, wedding dress. Johnny had her by the hair, threw her to the ground, put his knee on her back. He still had his sunglasses on. I thought this was a bit of an opportunistic knock, especially as he was sat opposite her with his glasses on. I think she was trying to make. I think they were trying to make the jury think, look, what you see there right now is what was bearing down on her. But despite all of this, I've got in capitals, I wanted to marry him so much. And then the first moment, and here's the moment, guys. Bang, bang, bang. This is where things start to change for me. So you could probably hear that I'm sort of trying to tread. I'm thinking, okay. Okay, I can see where she's coming from with that. Okay, I can see this, I can see that. Um, and then the waterworks started. And who was there for the piano moment? Where after this scene of aggression and violence, um, with his sunglasses on, with him saying he didn't want to marry her, with his knee on her back. So she comes out of this and she's crying, and she starts to really cry. And there's the piano moment. Piano. She sat next to him at the piano with her head on his shoulder, and she started to cry. Now, just because what ensued in her performance in the dock was so skin blisteringly difficult to watch for so many different reasons. For so many different reasons, guys. One, if she's lying, it does, as I've seen so many people say in so many different forums, it does an enormous disservice to genuine victims of domestic abuse. If she's telling the truth, her overperformance of the truth, there's still a performance there. Her delivery of the truth will have certainly held me at arm's length. It kind of went more, because I immediately went, oh no, this is too much. Because I found that the switches between trauma and pleasant, nostalgic reminiscence too quick. Did anyone else agree? I found if she was as traumatized, and I'm not saying she wasn't or couldn't be, or if this happened to her, she shouldn't be, would she be able to have gone and sat opposite Johnny in the way that she did and talk with such sort of, like she was bouncing through a field of daisies when she first met him? There was something for example, I just thought if I was directing her, I'd have said, you've just got to bring it down a notch, and we need to kind of take longer to get from that state to this state. You've got to get there in a more graduated fashion. And I hate to say it, I think she might have looked online last night and seen and read that people said there were no tears, because she made huge endeavors today to demonstrate that she was actually crying. I thought, I mean, the reason I'm loath to say, the reason I don't like saying this is because there's something deeply discomforting about potentially just saying she was performing when she's talking about such heinous crimes. But what I still don't understand is a couple of simple things. She didn't bring charges against him. She didn't and doesn't have any hard and fast photographic proof beyond some alleged scratches and very superficial, I would say, scratches, as someone said, shot in a way that, every actress knows where your key light and your fill light is, for sure. I don't know, one feels uncomfortable having to question that, but at the same time, all you can do, and this is what the jury have to do, is what is your honest response? Forget whether I'm a man, what is my honest response? And as a father, and I'm thinking, oh my God, if that was my daughter in the dock, how would I feel? How would I feel? How would I feel? As a man sat there, I was thinking, hang on a minute, this is too much. There was something about it that was too much. Sophie R, I'm so sorry. I was raped around 10 years ago, and when I gave evidence, I was extremely emotionless. I felt very distanced from the whole thing and thought people would think I was lying. Absolutely, and I'm sure that's the case for you. And I don't think necessarily you can even extrapolate from that and say that how everyone would testify is the same, because everyone's experience is different and everyone processes things differently. But this first moment for me, I found very, very odd. They got married. They drove to his mother's home where she was very old and dying. They had a private ceremony there. Then they went to the Bahamas with close friends. She had to leave early because she was filming. But here's a curious detail. What about this detail? So for their 3-day sort of wedding celebration on the Bahamas island, she's already talked about his struggle, how she, the whole Al-Anon thing. She's talked about, the promises of sobriety followed by the crashes and the rock bottoms and all this. But she's quite happy to go off with a group of women and take mushrooms. don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with going off and taking mushrooms with your girlfriends. But she said it in such a sort of that why would you have sort of seen it as sort of so benign if drugs was at the center of all the trauma that was going on in your life? What do you think, guys? Claire H, maybe she was trying to fit in with her own friends. I don't know. It's her do. It's her event. I mean, you get peer pressure, I suppose, beer pressure. No A&E visits either, Faith Goodman. Absolutely right. So her wedding celebrations were cut short. She headed back to shoot The Danish Girl with little Eddie Redmayne. I mean, Eddie Redmayne. I mean, Eddie Redmayne doesn't sit still long enough for anyone to have an affair with, does he? The idea of sleeping with Eddie Redmayne was ridiculous. And so then we get to Australia, and he's shooting Pirates 5, P5 as she calls it. Eddie Redmayne, she's leaving Eddie Redmayne, who's kind of doing a lot of this shit and all that sort of stuff. He claims that she's asked for a bag of MDMA. I thought the lady doth protested too much here. Why would I? As if I would, because of her experience on the plane. What did you think of that? Who thought? Right, I'm going to ask that. That's a good question. Who? Oh, hang on. Oh, end poll. Hang on. Oh, hang on. I just asked nothing. Oh, sorry. I just asked nothing. Oh, here we go. Did Amber order MDMA from Johnny in Oz? Was the bag for her? Because even in his madness, would he have been so bold as to say, here you go, here's a great big bag of drugs? If he knew, she's only just come from taking mushrooms. He could have been given this, he might have got the impression, well, maybe she still likes taking drugs. I don't know. So then we get to her experiences in Australia. He pulls out the MDMA. The origins of the argument doesn't sound believable. Flew over. Oh, yes. So all the violence starts in Australia. She forgot to talk about him having taken a lot of MDMA. She said he took 10 MDMA pills. Still believing Eddie Redmayne is a problem. Still, obviously, I tell you what, I definitely think is the case, and I think it's a bit pathetic, Johnny. I definitely think Johnny had a bit of a problem with Eddie Redmayne. Doesn't make him an abuser, though, does it? But I definitely think he had a bit of a problem with Eddie Redmayne. And you know what? I'd have a problem with James Franco. Nice to look at, but what a nasty piece of work. So in Australia, it all goes a bit pear-shaped, doesn't it? He starts to kind of gets intolerant with her lawyer. She's trying to sort out a post-nuptial. It makes him think about, are you thinking about the end? I thought maybe there were question marks there. Is it all a bit pre-nup, post-nup? What was going on for her? What was going on for them? You notice the way I'm just sliding you through little photos there. These are some of the selected photos that some of the tabloids have chosen to show. He'd say things like, everyone warned me about you, which must hurt. That can't be nice. She's still a young actress and whatever. Taunts her with a bottle, throws a bottle at her, holds a broken bottle against her face. And at this point I was thinking, flipping heck, is the policy here, and I think this might have been the policy, of bombarding the jury with simply so many different instances of this, what's essentially a similar sort of stuff. Held me, threw me against a wall, held his hands at my neck, put his knee on my back, still no proof, still no A&E reports, still no charges, still virtually no proof or record. I mean, I had a bit of a moment. Did anyone else have a moment when you saw the underside of the bed, the split bed, the bit of wood? And I thought, oh, that does look like an impact. But then I thought, I know I've seen Nadia break cups and glasses and things like that. Do you know what I mean? Mohammed Ahmed, when did she train as a doctor? All these injuries that drew blood, vaginal injuries, broken nose, and she tended to herself and never visited a doctor once or took photos. Bruises more important. Taunted with a bottle, broken bottle. Now, I wrote this here. Look, if this is true, he's awful. I wrote, was in the middle of that. If this is true, what she's saying, and I was, you know, those who follow the channel know that when I get really embarrassed, I get my left armpit sweats out of embarrassment, just my left arm. When she started crying, my left armpit was really going. And just to stress, this is not making light. This is not making light of someone who's gone through something traumatic. But what I don't understand, if she was bringing charges against Johnny for having done these things, it would be a different thing. This is someone trying to, or these are two people trying to throw up enough evidence to suggest that they're right in their defamation case in one instance, or their defense of not having defamed someone in the other. You know, if she'd come to court for the first time claiming this and she was going through this, it would be a very different set of circumstances for us all to sit here going, oh, well, I don't believe her. I think she's, you know, that would be seen as harsh and it would be seen as callous. But this is, she's trying to prove something. She's trying to prove unwilling or refused to bring charges against. So yeah, so if this is true, so I said, if this is true, he's awful. And if this is false, she's awful. But as some of you have said, maybe some of both sides is true and some of both sides is false. And then I made a note, is this the approach? This is clearly the approach of her counsel, her defense. If she's willing to say so much, there was a point by the end of today, and, you know, obviously there's a few more bits to go through, but there was a point by the end of today where I was thinking, do you know what? Did any of you feel this? Do you know what? Fucking hell, some of this must be true. It's almost like, what's it called when you, Stockholm syndrome. At one point I was just like, yeah, whatever you say. Yeah, I mean, I got slightly worried that they were going to just sort of like, they're just going to pummel down the jury into submission. Careful, she'll claim that I did that to her. Is this a policy? Who thinks this is a policy? New poll coming. Let's have a look. 74% say yes, she did order MDMA. New poll coming, guys. New poll. Is it Amber's approach to batter down the jury with more and more stories? Is that their policy? Is that their policy? Let's just move her on a little bit. Oh, now that's what she claimed was her hair. That looks like Toffee's been in the room and pulled a bit out. These are some of the photos of her bruises. As you can see, yeah, those lights behind you. I've never known an actress or someone who's off the telly or off film not be aware when there's a light behind that. Well, apart from Nadia, to be fair. Yeah, that. Oh, here we go. We're back here. Okay, let's well, seeing as we're here with this photo, what did you think of her crying, guys? What did you think of her crying? Dawny Harvey, she was performing. Those tears weren't real tears from trauma. Those weren't real tears from trauma and pain. He and Eddie were in Fantastic Beasts together. No reports of them having conflict. Southern Belle. Maybe he fancies Eddie Redmayne. Maybe. Very important point, Claire H. Literally thousands of women are abused and don't get A&E reports or tell any doctors or police. Well, thank you for that. There you go. She would have glass up, or why didn't she get checked? Well, I refer you back to Claire H. Not everyone. I just think it's curious that no one else would have noticed this. I mean, she also talked about having cut her feet. And as someone mentioned earlier, you know, there was never any talk of there being bloodied footprints, were there, up the stairs or anywhere? Or anything like that. What did we think of her crying? Okay, let me rephrase that. What did we think of her crying? Even if she was telling the truth. I mean, I think even if, let's assume for a minute she's telling the truth. I think even if she's telling the truth, it just didn't work, did it? Oh, look, I want to try this. Let me show you this. I think it was during the lunch break, there was this remarkable moment where they nearly walked into each other. Check this out.
Him.
Oh, no, that's not it. Check this out. Watch. Can you see her? She's getting down. Johnny Depp's just happily moving off to find a crack pipe. And oh, it's a bit awkward, bit orcs. Oh, yeah, stand in front, keep your back to her, and then she walks through. Did you see that? Do you like the way I just pulled in that clip? It's like a mini little fucking movie TV studio in here. And let me I just want to show you this.
I feel this.
Let me just pause that, take it back.
My back is turned to him, and I feel this boot in my back. He just kicked me in the back. I fell to the floor. I remember feeling so embarrassed. I felt so embarrassed that he could kick me to the ground in front of people. And more embarrassing, I didn't know what to do about it. I got up and I walked to the front of the plane. I sat down and I just looked out of the window.
Didn't believe it. I mean, I feel bad saying that. But I don't know. I just don't believe her. Do you? Oh. So yeah, I had notes here saying if she's willing to say so much. Oh, hang on. So what do you think? Fiona Grockett, Mark, did you know that yesterday when she first took the stand and talked to Doran Lee about Johnny, that she quoted word for word an extract from the talented Mr. Ripley? I didn't know that. Did she really? Your face watching her talk. Where are the tears? I agree. What a performance. Cringy. What people are there witnessing? Yeah, who else says that she kicked? Where are all the other witnesses? Well, to be brutally fair, let's not forget, we're going to have her entourage of people are going to come on, and they're going to, I mean, I tell you what, I thought her hitting the stand was going to be the biggest moment. Now, we ain't seen nothing yet. We need 10 days away from this trial to get ready for what is going to happen when she's cross-examined. Because let's not forget, Johnny got very short, didn't he, with Rottenborn and the lady that's her counsel. And so, you know, he got rattled, he got pressed, he got his buttons pressed. We you know, let's see how she copes with a similar set of pressure. She talked, I think the moment where she really lost herself and was performing hard, and again I say that, you know, with in mind that we always have to have the caveat, she could be telling the truth. It was black. I couldn't see him. She fell to pieces at this point. And this is when she started to talk about the incredibly serious allegation of him putting a vodka bottle inside her, and her saying, you know, please God, I hope it's not broken. Now, once again, we can't get into the did they, didn't they. If this isn't true, she is going to hell in a handcart. Is that the right phrase? That is the kind of allegation that destroys someone. And so, in a sense, you sort of think, if you haven't brought, I don't know, should she be saying this even, you know, should this only be said if there was someone else to kind of verify it? That was dirty. That was vile. Hope the jury see through that. Her mask nearly slipped as the objections, and she raised her voice and said, I was there. Good phrase, Mark. They didn't say correct once today. But then she said she took a load of sleeping pills after an assault. Then she said she took only 2. Well, I also noticed, I made a point that she suddenly, oh yeah, look here. Here's a point. If she was genuinely as distressed as she was seeming to be, wouldn't the judge or her own lawyer have said, would you like to pause? Do you not think? You often hear, I mean, I know it's a thing you see in films, but look at the photo of her. If she was as distressed as she was, why didn't the judge or her own counsel say, would you like to take a moment? Would you like to compose yourself? And then she made a very quick recovery to talk precisely. Sorry, I've lost who said it. Who said to say that she took sleeping tablets to fall asleep. She got perky. And for me, from a performative perspective, forget all the kind of body reading and all that kind of stuff that the Daily Mail and all that lot keep employing. Then when you go to it, they say nothing. For me, it's the transitions, the actorly transitions from trauma and upset through to upbeat, nostalgic reflection. Those are the mood changes. I'm not saying she's a particularly good actress either. I haven't seen enough films with her in them. But those are the gear change. Those are the shifts that are sometimes required in a day from an actor in scenes in the same location, shot at different times. So say you've got 4 scenes to shoot in a bedroom. One of them is you meeting someone and being really happy to meet them. But later in the day, because you want to use the same set and you've only got that set for one day, so you shoot all four setups in the film. You might have a setup at the beginning, the middle, and the end, 3 setups. So you shoot your first one, it's all upbeat. You shoot your middle one, which is all sultry, and you shoot last one, which is trauma and upset. You shoot them all one after the other. And I'm feeling that for me, what's most interesting, and that's why I wanted to watch her testimony in as much detail as I could this evening. I haven't seen any of the family. I wasn't in the review with Nads. Is because it's those transitional points. It's the way she moves from trauma into, sort of quite sort of nostalgic. And obviously, as some Julie Taylor, you're stressing personality disorder symptom again. It's also a sign of it could that personality, that borderline personality disorder could be the thing that makes her a really good actress. Or makes her, or if not a good actress, means that it's why she's become an actor. I can think of many people I've met and I know who are actors or are good actors who clearly have borderline personality disorder. So she laughed about falling asleep. She could hear Marilyn Manson's music. Oh, damned by association again, poor old Johnny Depp. And as she talked, as soon as she talked about the bottle incident, on my phone, I got about 6 red top newspaper headline alerts saying Johnny Depp raped Amber with a bottle. So her PR team, let's not forget she's employed a new PR team. They are definitely behind some of the stage management of this. And don't forget, she's not allowed to talk to her team. She's not allowed. I don't know if she's not allowed to talk to her PR team. She might be, but she's not allowed to talk to her lawyers. Yasmin Asghari, she's admitted she feels like she has many different personalities. It's a bit creepy, isn't it? Here's a curious statement. So I made a note. Then there was the story about Johnny in Australia when there was that fight where the Scottish guy was trying to get him out, where apparently he got his penis out and went for a wee up the wall. There are some issues with that because if he did do that, his people didn't testify to say that he did. If I'm brutally honest, him urinating up against a wall saying, "I'm leaving you a message," I don't know why. I think it's the kind of thing Johnny Depp might do. Do you know what I mean? This is where if you're impartial enough, you can go, "Oh, I can kind of believe that. I can kind of believe that. I can kind of believe that." I can also kind of believe this weird one. What did you make of the wrapped steak meat wrapped up in her nightgown? Now, it's weird. It's not pleasant. It's a bit rock and roll. It kind of reminds me of my first girlfriend who bought me a real cow's heart as a Valentine's present. Cher Debus, I feel hurt by her mental state. What hurt as in she's committing a wrong or hurt on her behalf? Steak baked 99. That makes no sense. What, the steak meat being wrapped up? And yet again, I've got a note here. She'd say, after everything she's gone through, she's been raped with a vodka bottle. She's gone through all this. I just married this man. I still wanted to make it work. Now, I understand that the systematic abuse, it's not about just being able to run away. It's also not about, feeling like you can escape. It's also feeling like you can change things. But I don't know why at this point, when it's gone so catastrophically wrong, I didn't believe her. I just wanted to marry him comment. I've put in, look, I've even circled it in green. Given the scale of trauma described and felt, how could she re-access the positives? She went back to going, but I just married him. It was all great. It's all this, it's all that, and all the other things. And then we started to move through. She bought a book on rescuing relationships. Johnny, the point that Johnny was texting another woman that apparently he'd gone and slept with or had been with on the night of their honeymoon. Again, that could be one of those aspects that was true, and maybe here's a possible narrative. Maybe he had done that. What an arse! What an absolute arse! Doesn't make him an abuser. What an arse! What a disrespectful idiot! Doesn't make him an abuser. But it might have made her want to make him jealous if she'd known about it sooner. See what I mean? It's all these strange little power struggles going on in a relationship. She then referenced, just under her voice, the suggestion she made in London that he'd thrown Kate Moss down some stairs. She then talked about being headbutted. It was the headbutted moment. She said it was one of the few examples in which I remember the pain. One can't really challenge that, because obviously there are countless instances in which terrible trauma, violence, and aggression can result in you blanking out, losing consciousness, and all this kind of stuff. Mark, here is your answer. Quote Amber Heard: "My dad struggled with alcohol abuse issues his whole life. He's an addict and he was very violent, but I love him very much." As in, that's the same thing she's saying about Johnny. Yeah, I agree. I think she was trying, lots of people are trying to work out what, their relationships with their parents through their fellas. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think you're more than probably right. I mean, I've said at great length, actually. I think I have a huge amount of compassion for this woman's own experience of dealing with addict parents and then being in a relationship with an addict. It's not easy. And I just wonder whether at some point enough was enough for her in terms of living with an addict, and some slightly pernicious desire to ensnare, entrap, gaslight, honey trap this guy kicked in. He behaving like an idiot, an insensitive person who's who goes off as an infidel, goes off and has relationships, does whatever he wants, doesn't care about crews being late and all that kind of stuff. Clearly he has a disregard for huge numbers of people, but it doesn't make him an abuser. And it just seems to be the lack of evidence is the major moment. Did anyone else notice someone shout in the court at one point? This was around the moment where she was talking about him hitting her with his cast. He went to hit her sister. Then there was the headbutting incident, which some of those photos were from. She was getting more and more irate. Look, there she is. And I made a note here. Is there a danger of using too many examples? Will the jury be weary now? Will the jury just be thinking, oh, for God, is it a bit like that Monty Python sketch saying it's a mere flesh wound, I can bite you to death? Will they have been beaten into submission, the jury, to either go, yeah, you're right, he's an arse, or for fuck's sake, shut this woman up? And so there we had it. And so there were just many moments. She'd slump in her chair. She went quiet for a moment. She talked about going on James Corden, didn't go on James Corden. She had a bloodied lip. I mean, I suppose those bits, what are the bits that made me sort of pause for concern and think, right, Johnny's team need to do something about it? Tell me what you thought. What were your bits where you thought, oh, you know what? Johnny's lawyers need to sort that shit out a bit. Reem AW, it'd be interesting if her sister does testify, wouldn't it? Ashley J, she's got a personality disorder and he is a major drug addict. I think they're both unreliable, a match made in hell, and they're in love with tearing each other down. Me and Nadia said earlier today, wouldn't it be lovely if they just walked across the sort of courtroom and just shook hands and just went and headbutted each other? And shook hands and just went, do you know what? Let's just call it a truce. And if they did that, and she said, okay, I can't remember everything. And he went, okay, I can't remember everything. But you know what? Let's push on. Don't you think they could then rescue both their careers? I'm sure they could. The vodka bottle and headbutt bit. That, for me, the headbutt is where his lawyers need to get, we need to get in there. I think where he's most vulnerable and where there's the sort of big question marks are whether it was rough and tumble, whether it was him, trying to move her away versus him headbutting her. The hair, the busted lip. And I also, and the recording things. I mean, I'd want to ask the question, if for saying you were recording things, why haven't you got anything that is an absolute slam dunk? Why haven't you got on tape or on film him hitting you? given that you've got all this other footage? That's what I'd ask. That's what I'd ask. Okay, well, let's do. You're right. It's time for a vote. Let's do. Sorry, I've just got to pull this across for a minute. Let's do. What should we do? Should we do? Who do you think is going to win? This isn't who do you want to win. This is after these various days of hearing what he's got to say and what she's got to say and all this kind of stuff, knowing the way it's going. Who do you think is going to win? So let's do that. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Thanks for all your contributions. Who's going to win? Not who you want to win, but who will win. Okay? So is it Depp or Heard? Or, well, no, Depp or Heard. Mandy Beddoes, she's so embarrassing to women. She will know her true colours on Ross. What's that? If we're plugging channels, Emily D. Baker is great. Unsolved Cases, the restraining order, but then she went back and wanted to sleep with him. It doesn't scream she's scared of him. But by the same extension, couldn't she argue? I mean, there's a difference between what the traits of domestic abuse are and what I'm trying to argue for in a court is that this case has to be treated differently because of the personalities involved and because of, well, unfortunately, because of the Hollywood aspect and everything else about it. Because I can hear someone saying about that, but didn't she want to sleep with him because she's been so systematically abused that she feels she has to stay with him, that she can't leave her abuser? Do you know what I mean? All that kind of stuff, that she wants to stay with her abuser. I don't buy that, because if you've been apart from him, you've got a restraining order and you're wanting a divorce and everything else, why would you want to see him, let alone sleep with him? Sophie R. Mark, I'm very pleasantly surprised at how different your reaction is today compared to earlier in the week. You seem very fed up with Amber now. Fed up with. Look, all I want to make sure is that as I move inexorably towards what are my absolute sort of gut feelings, I just want to make sure that I'm using checks and balances to make sure I'm not just making a knee-jerk Johnny Depp loyal blind. I'm not demonstrating blind loyalty, I suppose. That's what I'm wanting to make sure. Let's have a look. Okay, so it's gone down, because earlier in the week it was like 80%. So 75% think Depp's going to win, 25% think Heard's going to win. I'm really, well, we've got 10 days off, and then I think, unfortunately, we're going to still have her on the in the stand with her lawyers talking her through the op-ed and all that aspect, and then we get the cross-examination. And I think that at that point, the cross-examination, that's when it's going to get particularly tasty. I think, to kiss goodbye to tonight, I think we should end with them trying to avoid each other again. What do you think? Should we do that? Should we end with them, the awkwardness of them in court? Let's do it. There she goes. Yeah, got my bottle, got my tissues. None of them are wet, really, are they, the tissues? Right. Oh, shit, there he is. What an arsehole. Johnny's like, oh, okay, dude. Yeah, okay, move me over here. I don't want to show my doodles, man. Huh. Where are my gummy bears, mate? And she's like, yeah, get me over there quickly. Get me over there. Where's Eddie Redmayne? Where's Eddie Redmayne? There you go. Guys, thank you so much. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, honestly, all sorts of weird fun shit, those, you know, regular members and loyal followers, they'll all tell you we try to be as unprecious as possible, as real as possible. There's movie reviews. We've got the weekly rushes coming at the weekend, gives you all the streaming and movie news. We do trailer reactions, movie reviews, TV reviews. Showbiz news is coming back. Nadia's really keen for that. We've got cookery films, we've got gardening films. When I say gardening films, it's not like Monty Don, it's like we don't garden, but we garden. And there's mental health chats, and there's all sorts of stuff here. So yeah, subscribe and follow us, guys. Have a lovely day. Have a lovely day. Have a lovely evening. See you in the morning. It will be the Friday coffee moaning quiz, and the vlogs will be landing, and all sorts of other stuff too. So bye. And it never